learning entrepreneurship by doing it is all we care about. Real life entrepreneurship is something we talk all about. Is if this isn't reflecting the actual experience, then we're not doing it right. Get familiar with chat-based AI tools and just get obsessed. Find a personal project where you are daily using Claude or ChatGPT. If you spend a year heads down, you're going to be ahead of 99% of the people in your community and will be able to use that to solve a lot of problems in new ways. It is such a cool time to solve problems in your community with tech. And most people are so focused on building the next LLM or going to be the next quadrillionaire. Like, if you just applied this in your backyard, you can make tremendous impact.
What makes someone a great entrepreneur?
They're really good at finding things that people hate to do that they do not hate doing. If you can boil it down to that, anybody can be an entrepreneur. It's not your ability to raise capital or build a software. So.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jerry Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. You may or may not know, this is the show where I get the privilege to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together through these conversations to try to leave the world just a little bit better than we found it or it found us. Today, I'm super excited, very grateful to be joined by Logan Herzog, Executive Director at Rise. I'm going to tell you why I'm excited in a little bit here. Logan and I have a bit of a history. We were traveling, wandering nomads who found each other in the old Twitterverse while we were crossing paths in Latin America. And so we've got a lot of history, even though we've not ever had the pleasure of meeting yet in person. We will rectify that at some point in our future. So let me tell you a little bit about Logan before we welcome him into today's show. He has helped founders grow companies on 4 continents. He's taught go-to-market strategy at the University of Notre Dame, go Irish, and he's helped build startups in Costa Rica and Malaysia. And although he now spends his time back here in the United States, he's not in one of those branded, well-known entrepreneurial hubs like Silicon Valley or Boston or even here in LA. Instead, he's in small-town America in the northwestern part of the state of Indiana, in the shadows of the Golden Dome and one of the country's best private universities, asking 2 dangerous questions. What if entrepreneurship education is broken? And how can we deliver better to our young people? Logan is the kind of operator who's been on the front lines of change and real ground-up innovation, building and growing while experiencing these triumphs and tragedies that only we entrepreneurs truly understand. But he's also brought his service-first heart and those lessons into classrooms, turning global startup wisdom into real tools for local entrepreneurs and young people. He's not just here to talk about classroom theory today, though. He's here to talk about transformation on an individual human and a systemic level. And I'm super grateful to see him. It's great to visit. It's been great to hear his voice pre-show already. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Logan. It's really great to see you.
Yeah, same. So fun to be here. And like you said, good to be back in touch.
Yes, no, 100%. You are snow daying it out in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest, as we would say. While I sit out here, I'm not going to complain. It's a bit chilly today here in Los Angeles, but it's still Los Angeles and the sun is out. And so I'm not going to complain that it was like 47 degrees overnight. But you're living the Midwestern storm dream as we record this, that last week of January when the U.S. has been wiped out by snow.
That's right. Yeah, no, we're bundled up. We're excited for it to hit a balmy 20 degrees next week when it finally warms up.
That's all right. The best part about winter in the Midwest is the anticipation of spring.
Oh yeah, 100%. But it's a beautiful place, beautiful part of the country. Kids love the snow, thankfully, because we have plenty of it.
Yeah, there we go. We've got a lot to talk about today, and we're going to kind of take it in a whole bunch of different directions. I always joke, and folks who listen to the show all the time know, right, if I'm doing my job, this should sound like 2 old friends talking about stuff they love to talk about, and I already feel that vibe. So I'm curious. I'm going to drop this first question in, and we're going to kind of run off into a whole bunch of other topics. But as I was doing my research and preparing for this and looking at what your organization does and kind of I know your history, like I'm curious, like if entrepreneurs fail at such a high clip, which we all accept that entrepreneurship is tough and most businesses fail, why do we bother teaching entrepreneurship to young people at all when we could just leave it to them to learn experientially later on their own?
That's a great question. And I address this a lot because the majority of the students that I teach, particularly in our high school program, will go on to top universities and take a pretty traditional path into business. They'll be entrepreneurial. But the explanation I give is that I typically share anecdotes about when my back has been against the wall as an entrepreneur and how how I pivoted or used the skills that I developed as an entrepreneur to get out of that jam, whether that was, and then sometimes I'll share about pivoting into another venture or into a new career because I've done both.
Yeah.
And if for no other reason, giving people the tools that empower them to handle that moment well, whether in a career setting or in a venture setting, I think gives them so much confidence. I personally have experienced, as you have, the stress of trying to start a business in a different country. And the fact that I've done that and we ended up selling it gives me the confidence that, okay, no matter where you put me, I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's why we teach entrepreneurship at its core.
I love that. All right, so I'm curious, you're deep in it. Are we, and I'm a bit more removed of it. I'm definitely kind of removed from it now in this context of my work with the show, especially here in the United States. Are we failing at entrepreneurship education in the US, kind of outside of the tech startup VC hubs, or are we succeeding? And why do you think so?
I think that there's I think we're teaching things out of order, because really, if anything, I think that quote unquote regular business, which is 95% of the non-venture space is over 95% of the US market, I believe, maybe 90 at minimum. There's an out of order issue. And then I think that there's a bit of a tactical gap. I don't think failing is quite the right word. I do think that academia thinks they're much further ahead than they truly are.
Okay.
I believe in my experience in the on the academic side of the fence, which kind of crosses into venture and non-venture, but a lot of times is focused on venture. They teach go-to-market as a sort of cumulative event at the end of a rainbow. But when you start a business, you realize that it starts with a sale. And so I think that the things that are broken, there's some systemic issues that make the actual academic mechanism difficult to fix. But the problems that I see, 90% of them can be summed up in we're just teaching go-to-market way too late, and we're not equipping people to actually do it at an early stage. We think that the first thing you do is file an LLC and go talk to a lawyer, and that's how you start a business. So in some ways, I think regular business has done that better because the venture process, there's a lot of dopamine hits outside of a sale you can get. You can go pitch, you can go get investment. And so that order can be conflated. But if you go talk to your average plumber or HVAC guy in middle America, I developed my trade and eventually got a few side gigs and I built it up into something. I think it's broken, but I think the solution is pretty simple.
That's awesome. You guys use in your language that shows up across your different materials. I think there was an annual report from a couple of years ago that was attached to one of the websites, which I dove into deeply and was completely impressed by. But you use this phrase that I'm curious about: radically different. So what does radically different entrepreneurship education look like?
It's kind of ironic because on the one hand, it sounds crazy to teach it any other way, but learning entrepreneurship by doing it is all we care about. So that's what attracted me to Rise. I have very little interest in the theory of entrepreneurship. It's why I left school. I dropped out of community college, essentially. And it was a junior college. So I already didn't believe that the theory of entrepreneurship was overly useful until you were in it. And so the cool thing is we figured out how to get kids high school and college credit in our high school program to just show up and build a business with us every day. And I think that's the radical part. It's how do we get the actual process of starting a business to fit the systems that allow us to get credentialed and move on to the next phase of life with the piece of paper that you may or may not need, right? So for us, learning by doing is at the core of that. Real life entrepreneurship is something we talk all about. Is if this isn't reflecting the actual experience, then we're not doing it right.
Wow. I love that. And I mean, that plays so naturally to what you already discussed in the first couple of talking points there, right? So let's take it one step further, just kind of a geographic curiosity, right? Like how that might get deployed or employed or taught here in Los Angeles versus in Houston versus in Boston. How is this radically different, kind of getting kids to come and earn college credits or high school credits for building real businesses together with you? How is that different, if you think, based on your global experience in Northwestern Indiana and Southwestern Michigan, than it might be different anywhere else?
Well, industry is the big one. When I moved here, I had to learn that, listen, my background was either like B2B SaaS or B2B digital services. My entrepreneurial background is in the agency space because I started multiple agencies. So that's what I knew. And the cool thing about that was you could start that anywhere. When I showed up in Indiana, it became very clear that industry was the really important thing. We're trying to, everybody knows the history of the Rust Belt, whatever you want to make of that. So we're trying to bring that back. And there's been tremendous success and effort to do that well before I ever showed up here. But the industry is a huge factor. I think it's too big of a factor. I think that sometimes in the entrepreneurship space, if the goal is to learn by doing, right, with real life entrepreneurship, then it makes sense that we'd probably want to optimize for businesses where you can move really quickly with minimal capital and as a beginner, right? An agency, I think, is a good example of that. Costs almost no money to start an agency. You have to develop a skill and run with it.
As opposed to like forces beyond Rise that are trying to drive the educational experience for the kids to start an auto company.
Sure. Well, and I think that makes sense.
Start a light manufacturing business. So
totally.
I'm feeling like there might be a conflict as you're saying, reinventing or rebirthing industry here locally is hugely important, but also let's not preclude that we could birth entirely new industries or bring new digital industries to this place where people already are. These kids don't all necessarily have to literally invent and become entrepreneurs reinventing the past. Is that what you're saying?
100%. And I think what's cool is that our startup community in South Bend does a particularly good job of that. I don't feel like it pushes you too hard, but the institutions align a lot with industry. I think that makes sense because the institutions are trying to get you jobs, right?
Sure.
But it's something that I've actually had to I've had to change my opinion on this a little bit because I'd be in places like Da Nang, Vietnam, or I'd be in Quito, Ecuador, and I'd be like, why are we trying to start Silicon Valley? Like, what do we have here to work with, right? But then I see the flip side of, oh, well, it's actually really hard to get a high schooler to start a manufacturing business. So what are other models? But the institutions aren't always sure what to do with that. Yeah. So it can feel like you're being really disruptive I'm surprised sometimes at that.
Interesting.
But I think that industry is a huge factor. I wish it was a little bit less, but I understand why. And I think that's probably one of the biggest contributing factors. So
teaching, and we're going to talk about Rise here in a couple of minutes. So you're going to get to tell everybody about the whole thing, and everybody will clearly understand exactly what the organization does and what Rise stands for. Before we get to that, I've got a couple of nieces that are 17, going on 18, getting ready to go to college this coming fall, and then her little sister's 14, freshman. And so, Gen Z/Alpha, they keep me young. They keep me attuned to what's going on the streets, so to speak. But we also hear lots of discourse, lots of online social discourse, right? About Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids are either the most disengaged, most disinterested generation of all time, or they're the most engaged and most interested generation of all time. And so I don't want to hypothesize. You're literally on the front lines helping these kids become entrepreneurial thinkers, I'll say, right? Are they super engaged and curious about entrepreneurship and leadership? Or are they, as you said, most of them go on into college and kind of traditional paths. So are they taking these lessons and they're applying it? Are they doing it just for curiosity because it gets them a couple credits? What's the real scoop on the street?
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems. teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more.
Yeah, I think the hate on this generation is a bunch of bull.
Nice,
I'd have stronger words if I didn't. If I want my high schoolers
it's
to
my
listen to this,
podcast. We can swear, so it's okay.
We can swear. I know, but our parents will listen to this. So no offense, but insert whatever expletive you want. I have only grown more optimistic about the future, and we're in a wild time, regardless of what you think. We're in a wild time. I am really excited about the future. And I spend a lot of time around high schoolers.
Yeah.
And I obviously there are issues, and there's kids all along the spectrum in terms of where they're at and what their future could look like. But candidly, the fun part of being an entrepreneurship teacher essentially is that you get to break a lot of the rules. You get to be the one that says, listen, I don't care what you like. You get the grade you want. Let's figure out how to make this program give you what you want, right? You go build what you want to see in the world. This is your space and what you'll find is that even the kids that can be quote unquote troublemakers have really redeeming qualities that make you bullish on their future. So I am unashamedly optimistic about the future of this generation. I think they're far more equipped to face the challenges they face than my generation is. I think we're
interesting.
I'm seeing kids self-police on digital use. You know, I'm seeing kids kind of fix some of the things that I wish I was better at myself. Right?
Same. I like the 14-year-old that I referred to. Like I don't, other than using it to like DM friends. Like I don't think she's on social media at all.
I mean, yeah, it's not
that was
perfect.
A choice.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but this is a really exciting generation, and I think that we're going to end up better than we are today. I fully.
That's awesome to hear. I appreciate the timely validation, right? Because I've believed the same thing from a different lens and for a different set of reasons. I used to joke 10 years ago, like if we could get through this period and get to the other side, that we were going to be fine on the other side because these kids are so self-reliant and kind of independent. Now I'm not so sure if we're going to make it to the other side, but that's
of course, right? You got to get there. You got to get there.
That's a whole other podcast. But so you're sensing like they're taking these skills. They're grateful to take the lessons that they're learning from you all in your programs. And they intuitively understand that maybe the world that they're going to go into is going to be a little less kind of predetermined for them. It will require a little bit more independence and a little bit more self-reliance. And they seemingly are more equipped for that.
You know, we do, obviously there's selection bias because like we're a kind of a career technical program. So you apply to join and you go through that process, right? Our criteria is not necessarily academic. So there's kids all over the range here. So yes, but are they showing up in class and be like, yes, teacher, please give me all the information? No, they're challenging you.
They're high school. They're teenagers.
And they're hustlers. You know what I mean? Like they want to get out there and close deals, right? And they want to build companies and they don't want you to waste their time. So they need to be treated like adults. Like this is a generation that I think really craves this sort of peer mentality when you're in the room. And because I'm not a teacher by trade, I'm like, yeah, I kind of assumed you all were founders when we walked through the door. Let's go. Nice. But so it's not like you're not going to see the Von Trapp kids in my class anytime soon, but you are going to see people who are there to play the game, and they're coming in more educated on business and entrepreneurship than ever before. They're coming in with a lot of context, with a lot of vision for their life. And obviously the cool thing about our program is we kind of drive that through entrepreneurship. But make no mistake, these are real budding entrepreneurs. So I want to clarify, you know, they're not always sitting in a row perfectly here and they're asking hard questions. Yeah. But that's what you want to see.
That's been universally true. I'm older than you. I'm 57. I was in high school in the 80s. You didn't describe any profile of a teenager just now that we also didn't have back then. Right. So, and like, it's just, some of this is just being a teenager, right?
I totally agree.
I'm constantly encouraging my nieces in that uncle role, right? I'm like, like screw up, just don't screw up so badly that you can't recover from it. Like, but if you do know that like your parents and I, like, we love you and I got your back and you're going to get through this. But literally, like you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, like you're designed to screw up and not know what you're doing. Like you don't, if you have all the answers, like you're some weird freak of phenomena of humanity. So yeah, good for you. That's awesome. All right. So tell us about Rise. Like, here's a couple of things I'm curious about. You can approach it any way, like, right? Like, kind of what I read in the report, the annual report, which I think was like 2024, right? There's like 4 or 5 different programs. That's probably changed. There's probably more current kind of take on what's going on. So let's talk about that in the 2026 context. You've already talked about kind of who and how, like who the users are, who the clients, the beneficiaries, the kids are. But I want to really break it down. I want us to understand like Rise as an organization, right? Like what's the business model? How's it funded? Who are your benefactors in the community? Who do you partner with? And then we'll get to the whole, like, what's it going to look like in the future?
Totally. Yeah. So we're obviously in a transition era as I took this organization over about 8 months ago. Maybe not quite. Don't check my math. So Rise's mission is to empower emerging entrepreneurs through real life entrepreneurship, right? So that we talk about that learn by doing. Emerging and entrepreneur are a little broadly defined. We really have historically been the top of the entrepreneurial talent funnel in our region for the last decade. Been around a decade. We're mostly known for our high school programming. It was co-founded by Iris Hamel, an education thought leader, who was my predecessor, and Larry Garitoni, who's a philanthropist in the area. So his family office is the Garitoni Smith Family Foundation is one of our bigger supporters, and they've been a great partner for over a decade now. So it started with a little St. Joe CEO program. We got I think maybe a couple dozen high schoolers in a high school program, just getting them exposed to the different businesses in the community. That was all sort of coincided with what, to my knowledge, not being a super avid historian of the area yet, but to my knowledge, really the beginning of a big push for entrepreneurial activity in South Bend, which I think was accelerated during the Buttigieg years, and kind of a revitalization of downtown. Okay. So it's sort of been at the core of our entrepreneurial ecosystem, viewed as the top of funnel. Over the years, we kind of picked up more programs. We got into higher ed. The Garitoni Smith Foundation is also behind the entrepreneurship program in the Ivy Tech system. And Ivy Tech's interesting because Indiana really has one community college system. I think there's a few others, but it's dominated. There's, I think, 19 campuses for Ivy Techs throughout the state. So our curriculum has been throughout Ivy Tech at different parts of our history. And we've dabbled in kind of grant funded adult programming with the goal of changing education through entrepreneurship, which is why our website still is very like changing the education system. I think that there was a lot of amazing work that was accomplished during that first 10-year stretch. I joined the org a couple of years ago to kind of bring some of my startup knowledge and tech to the mix, and then eventually took the org over with sort of the mandate of build this into an entrepreneurship powerhouse wherever we can find kind of a niche. And our niche is brand new entrepreneurs or emerging entrepreneurial thinkers in their space. So there's a lot of future things that we're doing there.
Please feel free to use that phrase as much as you want.
Okay.
Someday when I write a book on this, which by the way, that someday is going to be someday in the next couple of years, we'll bring a tour through, we'll come through and we'll do something together with the high school kids and we'll talk about how to turn them into entrepreneurial thinkers right there.
Perfect. Yeah. No, and I'll make sure I get a royalty out to you every time I use entrepreneurial thinker, right? But I think it's a really fun time. There's ways that we want to evolve to focus even more on entrepreneurship and making that more accessible and easy. And I have pretty strong opinions on how to do that. But it's a really interesting thing to take over an organization with such legacy. And with, I've always started things from scratch. I joke that I've never been part of an organization with more than 18 months to live, So it's a very new thing and it's been really rewarding. So.
And you mentioned the one foundation, the family that was the main driver, the main original philanthropist who partnered with the founding young woman. Are there other like key corporations or donors or schools that you partner with that are key to things that, like, I mean, hey, I'm gonna give you a chance to shout the commercial out. Like, if you were calling out right now for like, what more support do you need? What more partnership do you need? What would you ask for today here in this conversation from some of those local corporations or other philanthropists or other family offices or the University of Notre Dame or the University of Indiana's, extension system? Like, who else do you want to partner with and what else do you need?
Well, so to answer the stakeholder question, the cool thing about this program is that it was designed to get kids into as many places around the ecosystem as possible so they felt connected. So our kids have visited there's a beautiful entrepreneurship hub called Momentum Hub in downtown South Bend that was just built, state-of-the-art co-working space and entrepreneurial center. They're touring that. They're touring the old Studebaker building where our economic development organization is now housed. They're touring Howard Park. It's a real, some cool areas downtown and get to be connected with their city. There's historically too, we've engaged with major companies in this region like Laco, Gibson Insurance. Tim Lehman's the CEO, so that's why I called it Lehman. A number of, I'm going to leave out so many organizations that have contributed and just allowed our kids in. And so as I'm thinking about what help we need going forward, it's largely not financial help. There's kind of two areas that we really want. I want to bring the best tactical advice around the world to our ecosystem and to our high schoolers. And so allowing our kids in, even metaphorically or virtually, to understand how the sausage is made around the world is critical. I've learned so much. I learned so much as a growth guy in the startup space from being in emerging markets and seeing how people grew businesses in different places and
100%.
utilize channels in ways I never understood. So to be able to get them that exposure is huge. On the other side, something that we're doing to be self-sustaining is we are sourcing better ideas that will be revenue positive faster. So for example, I sat down with the CEO of a hospice center who was telling me all about a very specific problem that if we were able to solve that with AI, he would pay high schoolers tomorrow to do it. Well, I could take that to my pool of 120 kids we're going to welcome to the program next year and say, okay, right, like this organization is ready to be a customer if you can solve this problem. We already have some legs. So what I am avidly chasing right now is problems that people will say, take my money if our kids can build a solution, and then they get to build a real business right out of the gates with a real B2B experience. We're lucky that our programs are on route to be self-sustaining. We're operating within our means. So I'm not going to be going on a huge fundraising tour anytime soon. Although if you're interested in building up startups in the Midwest through kids, please, we will find good ways to spend that money. I think I'll have a more compelling fundraising campaign in a year or two when we figure out how to position it. What we're trying to do is prove that we're trying to eat our own dog food, essentially, right? We're trying to prove that our process really does work and do that in collaboration with corporations. So
I'm curious, and this may be an unfair question to you because of your limited time there so far, but like the program has legs, right? 10 years it's been in existence, again, providing various levels of services and different programs. But that means that there are numbers of young kids now, young adults, who have gone through this and are alumnus of these experiences. Like, are there any great stories? Are there a couple of like random, like that kid went on and actually started a business from what we were doing and is still in business, or that kid went on and wasn't going to go to college and decided to go to college and then came out and went to work for something? Like, are there a couple of great stories that we tell to kind of illustrate what's possible?
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. Running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I'll call out some of the ones we go back to, but you have Kat Edmonds, who started a nonprofit. She was in the original cohort. She eventually exited that nonprofit to, I believe it was Logan, which is a massive healthcare organization. Well, I'm not exactly sure all the things that Logan does. I get the sense to do a lot of things. I'm still new to this region.
Conglomerate of some sort.
Yeah. Major organization in the area. And now she's got a really fast growing career at Notre Dame. She came back home.
Wow.
And came back to the region and has really been building it up and advocating for young entrepreneurs here.
Presuming she's probably like in her mid-20s or early to mid-20s.
Yeah, exactly. So she could be anywhere and she's here. And one of her side hustles is launching Connect 574, which is an organization for young entrepreneurs to help retain talent and young professionals, I should say, more broadly.
Okay.
So she's very active here. Her co-founder of that is Matt Sheldon, another alumni of ours, but through our college days, who took he's one of the preferred providers for tailgating in Notre Dame. And I had no idea how big a deal tailgating was in the Midwest.
Let me tell you,
his logo is up there next to Notre Dame's when he's advertising. He's like licensed.
Wow. He's like an officially licensed partner of essentially one of the biggest employers / economic needle movers in the region.
Yeah, so he's planning tailgating parties for major alumni organizations coming back, and the Notre Dame alumni is insane. The people that you end up rubbing shoulders with.
Quick personal reference, because this will give you some context, because there would have been no reason to talk about this previously, but to tie together with some of what we were talking about off the air before the show started about my familiarity with the region. So I grew up you either grew up a Notre Dame fan or not a Notre Dame fan. When you grew up, I was raised Catholic in Chicago. So Irish Catholic kid in Chicago, right? It's kind of like you're a Cubs fan or you're a White Sox fan. So I grew up a Notre Dame fan. And then I was lucky enough that my dad's best friend grew up during my era growing up, had a couple of sons who went to Notre Dame. I went to Notre Dame High School, which was in the suburbs, which was run by the same priests that run the university. So there's a lot of crossover. Needless to say, basically from about age, maybe 7 or 8 was the first time I remember it, until I left to go to school in Arizona at 18. Like basically we went to 2 home games per year at Notre Dame.
Oh, that's awesome.
So some of what you're referencing is you tell the stories and you're dotting little things geographically. I'm picturing through the lens of like, we made that drive.
Yeah.
Right. Like we drove from the northwest side of Chicago through the city, through the south side, through Gary, cut down, drive to South Bend. Like we've done that.
You've probably driven down Lincoln Way at some point.
I've done that so many times in my life, comparatively to maybe those who've never done it, that a lot of what I'm hearing you talk about is so reminiscent to me. It's fascinating. And it was also, again, as a student of history, for those that aren't listening, what we're talking about is a region of the United States that is a dynamic, was back in the day, as you said, as Logan described, like it was the heart of manufacturing and an adjunct to the automobile industry, which obviously everybody knows about the history of that in more central Michigan, but like is kind of this, if you're looking at a map, here's for those watching on YouTube, and for those listening, I'm just doing things with my hands right now. But if you go to a map and find Lake Michigan, right, which anybody can go look at, no matter listening or viewing, and then you see the city of Chicago and kind of how it takes up, and then just kind of off the spur of Chicago, just to the east, is this area of the country that we're referring to, so it's a very central, this is by no means, this is like out in the middle of nowhere farmland. No. This is a very central kind of urban / urban adjacent suburban area of the country that was highly populated and frankly, the main engine of economic growth in the United States as the U.S. migrated from an eastern seaboard dominated country towards the West eventually, right? So there's a whole segment. There's a reason why it's called in comedy terms like Second City, right? And for a long time before Los Angeles grew over the last 100 years, the prior 100 years, Chicago was literally the dominant urban central city population source outside of New York and that region, right? So like this was the hub of everything that then eventually enabled the creation of where I live now in the western part of the United States. So you're reimagining and reinventing something, not like some tiny 4,000 person town in the middle of Nebraska, right? Like you're rebirthing kind of an economic engine that was the economic engine that very few people now truly understand, literally drove kind of the whole expansion of the United States.
Yeah, and people don't really recognize how consequential is really the word you're kind of using here, right? It's between Chicago and the Great Lakes and the industry that's existed between Chicago and Detroit, and I'm not giving all these other major Midwestern hubs enough credit, but it's one of the reasons I came here. I was interested even, from my early 20s in the deindustrialization of some of these cities and what happened, both from a business and, social component.
Yep.
And when I was overseas, I was running a lot of blockers of like, man, it's really hard. One, it's really easy to become cringy white savior. I fell into that a few times, and I learned to try not to do that as much. But I realized I'll probably be much more impactful on my home turf, but that's a region of the country where, we want walkable cities, we want density, we want affordability, and the Midwest has all of that. And so why is no one there? Okay, how do we solve that? Can we use startups to solve that? And the cool thing about South Bend, I had some family near South Bend. It was the only real one person in the Midwest that I knew was my sister, and she lives about a half hour east of South Bend. And so it was an inkling, but they had made so much progress already. So I'm like, okay, they're figuring it out.
Yeah,
it's a very welcoming environment with with many great academic institutions in the city. And I thought, pretty good place to figure out how to do this if this is an interest of mine. And could not be happier with that choice. It's a really, really powerful region.
Good for you. And again, I will always say, like, Los Angeles is home, and it is home, and I will die happily here, and I love living here. But at the same token, like, where you're from is where you're from. Right. And that never changes. And so I'm both grateful for you and proud of you in a way that is maybe unique to me, and my experiences having grown up there, because it is a part of the country that is, like many parts of the United States and other places that you and I, and we're going to talk about that now here in a second, have been fortunate enough to traverse in different parts of the Americas as a whole. Like, it's a viable part of the country that is very worthy the effort and investment of talented young people with vision like you.
Yeah, I not to be too comical at a serious moment, but just so you know, I am a California-born kid who grew up a USC fan living in South Bend area, and you are a Midwest-born guy now living in LA.
USC people.
Yeah, a Notre Dame fan in LA. So we just kind of, that's a funny, funny flip there.
Trust me, I am still not. I still give all my USC friends a lot of shit.
I'm getting converted. I'm not gonna lie. I'm starting to fall in love with the gold and blue.
It's hard not to.
But,
it's hard once you're exposed to it. It's hard not to. And I gotta say, like, I went on a campus tour of USC with the niece I referred to previously that is getting ready to go to college and make her choices. I was in the neighborhood. Her mom called, was like, "Hey, do you want to meet us for lunch and we'll go tour USC?" And I was like, honestly, you know what? In all 28 years I've lived here, I've never gone on the campus.
Really?
Even though I've gone to a couple of games at the Coliseum, and I do a lot of other stuff in that neighborhood, but I had never gone to the campus because I kind of heard, I don't want to, right? Yeah. And then we go on the campus, and I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty cool little campus. They got a lot of good they got a lot of good things going on. So no, right, when you get exposed to it, it is what it is. But that's a great part of the story. Funny. I love that. All right, so we've alluded to it. We talked about it overtly a couple of times. You and I had this interesting kind of perspective and experience based on having traversed, barnstormed Latin America in a bunch of different ways. You teased it a little bit, so now I want to see if we can pull it out a little bit further, right? Like, what similarities are you seeing? Let's not talk about the differences. Like, what similarities are you seeing between some of these emerging entrepreneurial economies of Latin America where you were involved to what you're now seeing in these communities that you just named and that you're immersed in?
There's so many. Honestly, that's the thing that shocked me the most. And it's sort of the opposite of what I expected, because I had just been like this sort of ignorant American dude who never left the country, had this very eye-opening experience visiting 20 countries in 2.5 years by accident. I joked I was the Forrest Gump of digital nomadism. I was not purposeful or anything in that. It just happened in a way. And then I come back and realize, thinking it was like going to be so nuanced. And then I realized, oh, actually, we're all experiencing very similar issues.
Love that.
And we have very similar assets. And so it demystified a lot of this for me. I think the similarities are many. One is that unless you're on the coast from a venture perspective, you're kind of ignored. And I sort of resented that for a while, and now I get it. And I kind of, I'm inclined to fight against that less. And in the area of AI, I'm not sure how relevant VC always necessarily has to be to your entrepreneurship ecosystem. So there's that. I think there's really scrappy talent in Latin America and the Midwest. The Midwest is a bunch of hustlers. It's people who get up when it's -3 or colder and just go to work. There's very much you're not expected to be very flashy, and a lot of Latin America can be like that. We think of Miami, we think of I don't even know if Mexico City would consider flashy. It's just beautiful. beautiful. It deserves
Yeah.
to be flashy, but it's a lot of people who were raised to be humble and to not be very braggadocious, to maybe sometimes to their own detriment. The Midwest can be like that too. Great sales talent in both places. About a lot of things in Latin America and here, a lot of like just really good, honest kind of, well, I want to say salty there, but also very sophisticated. I mean, some of some of our best universities are in the Midwest. With really incredible talent. I'm 2 hours, well, maybe a little bit more from Ann Arbor, and I'm 45 minutes from Notre Dame. I mean, that's pretty. We're not even counting all the Chicago schools.
Big 10 universities, right? I mean, just that whole concentration of that. And again, not to say that has to be a path for people, but when it does come, as you've heard me talk about before on this show, as people know, like when it does come to trying to either reinvigorate or to stimulate entrepreneurial economies, like having vibrant, committed universities is a huge pillar of that whole process. Doesn't mean everybody has to go through it, but having them as reliable, both academic and in the broader sense, kind of corporate partners.
It brings Sorry, Rob.
No, it's okay.
It brings a legitimacy that can be hard if you're a mid-market city. Yep. Right? I mean, name recognition is probably a better term than legitimacy. Obviously, that's legitimate, but everybody knows Notre Dame. And so you can, a lot of people know where South Bend is, despite it being a relatively small city. I think additional similarities here are that the startup, the tech world kind of comes first in a way, when people are really being purposeful about entrepreneurship. I think that's not always the best idea. I think culturally it's really powerful. I think from a structural perspective, it's probably less than ideal in most cases. But I think that honestly, it's funny. I lived in San Jose, Costa Rica, St. Joseph in English, and I just moved to St. Joseph, Michigan. So there's a lot of maybe metaphorical similarities too. But I think that entrepreneurship ecosystems follow a curve that I've noticed everywhere I've gone, and the Midwest is really no exception. I think what we cannot count out is, and I don't want this to sound like I'm disparaging Latin America at all, but like the infrastructure we have available here, like I don't think no entrepreneur in the Midwest can complain in front of me right now. Like like we have so many things that we should be grateful for. That is not to say that there are not incredible cities with great infrastructure elsewhere. But I think that the one advantage we do have is that infrastructure extends beyond your major cities in a way that a lot of regions can't have.
They're just inherent. I mean, for all of our foibles and flaws and weaknesses, being exacerbated right now at a whole other level. There still is just a fundamental level of strength and capability that exists in most parts, the vast majority of the United States, that doesn't always replicate itself outside of the big urban areas outside the U.S. But I'm curious. I have a friend, Jamila Corbett. She's a VP of an organization called Established, which for our friends who've listened to the show, and I'll send you her episode because you'll be fascinated to meet her now, especially after I ask you this question. So she runs this Established organization, which acts as, and these are my words, not Jamila's, so I hope I'm doing her proud, but essentially kind of like an agency front, kind of on the grounds, boots on the ground type of partner for the SBA, for the Small Business Administration, and then for other various small business administration programs. And largely their job, and that they do programmatically in supporting entrepreneurship, mostly in communities like yours, frankly, as well as large communities and different pockets of entrepreneurial opportunity inside of places like Los Angeles, is to make sure that people understand that there are these resources, literal dollars, like billions and billions and billions of government dollars available to help stimulate local entrepreneurial economies, to help local entrepreneurs, to help emerging businesses, to help growing businesses, et cetera. So I'm curious, it doesn't sound like so far that your organization works with or partners with organizations like hers or directly with the SBA, but it does sound like that might be the types of things and creative partnerships that you would be interested in the next 10 years.
Sure. So the SBA type stuff's really interesting because it's a critical component, and I'm able to first off, the head of the SBDC in our area, the Small Business Development Corp, which I believe in most places they partner with SBA. It's like, it's a government funded thing. He's on our board. So there's a lot of collaboration.
Okay, awesome.
Here's the thing though. And I think the fact that we can approach it this way is a luxury that says a lot about South Bend, because SBA is one of the first boots on the ground in an up and coming entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think that we're actually at a phase in our ecosystem where we need to kind of turn people towards other approaches. Bootstrapping is so viable. And with this surge in financial education, especially over TikTok and short form, which is so important. It's so important. It drives people to think about business the way you would. It does the same thing that startup culture did. Everybody started seeing entrepreneurship through VC. And now a lot of people are seeing it through SBA. How do I get a loan to get into this capital intensive business? And while that is right for a lot of people, I speak to a lot of people where a personal guaranteed SBA loan will be the last thing that they would want to do financially, right? So that doesn't exclude them from the game. And so I think that our lane is very much, how can we help people grow something now? I spent my whole my specialty in entrepreneurship was, how do I get the first 10K in MRR without spending any money? Yeah. Right. And that was, I'm trying to bring that mentality as much as I can. So while
which by the way, as a compliment to you, I mean, that kind of mentality and those skills, which you are literally expert at, will be transformational in the lives of entrepreneurs. It's like, I mean, that's the whole, if you can make your first $10,000, like, you have literally changed the trajectory of everything that's possible for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plain Text Capital. Investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plain Text Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plain Text Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com.
Yeah, it changed my life completely. I mean, I did not have any financial safety net with a wife and 2 kids going through this. And so it was whether I was going to eat and pay rent based on how my business did, which is why I'm so passionate about helping people in that same situation now. It's an intense thing. So there are definitely alignments with those organizations. What we notice on the ground in these ecosystems, though, and I say we because we talk about this as an ecosystem, the leaders in our region talk about how there's a lot of program hopping, and there's people who you kind of find the dopamine hit from the grant, from the pitch competition, from this, and you never actually build. And so those programs are so important. There needs to be an engine driving people to do, because and I say this, out of luxury. We have a wealth of resources here. Now we have to figure out how to drive that into action. And there are many entrepreneurs in our region doing it. We just need more.
Yeah, we used to talk about that, right? In Latin America, in some of the programs, you could pick out the entrepreneurial tourists, right? The people who basically just were grant hopping, right? To just as a mechanism in their early 20s to live a life out of the life that they lived in Eastern Europe where they grew up or something, and now all of a sudden they've spent 7 years basically just hopping from program to program to program, being a semi-professional entrepreneurial grant hopper.
I think there's so much innovation in programs like Techstars and Startup Chile, but there'd be a whole other podcast that you and I could have on. Did that enrich Silicon Valley or did it enrich Santiago? Did it enrich
exactly? No, 100%
name that city.
True.
I think
100% true. All right, so building on what you were just talking about and kind of using and again, I'm in total fairness to you, like you've been in this seat running this thing for 8-9 months, and so more of what you'll figure out and what you'll envision is to come than has happened already. But you do have some lessons, and you bring all that lessons, the lessons learned from Latin America with you. So if someone said, in some other community in rural Colorado or in less central part of northern Michigan, or in Ohio somewhere in a Rust Belt town, or anywhere, right? In Mississippi, which, suffers from economic development issues. If someone said to you like, hey man, we want to activate an entrepreneurial community and entrepreneurial economy like Rise has done in Indiana, what's the map? What are the handful of things that they need to do to get started?
Great question. I think, one way that we do engage in those areas, we actually have somebody in the pipeline in Mississippi right now, in Biloxi.
How funny. Random state that I chose.
People want programming. We're really good at programming. We can facilitate sessions and workshops and get people very hands-on like we do with our high schoolers. And so that's an easy place to start. I say easy, like you can find curriculum. I mean, honestly, I don't consider us in the curriculum game because AI is going to disrupt that so much.
Yeah.
You can create curriculum now pretty easily, and you can find facilitators to run these sessions and just get people in the same room. And that's something that we do and we've done in many different places. So we've engaged there. I think that another thing that's really critical that South Bend does well, if to answer your question of where do you start, it's get the people at the top into rooms with people just starting. And that's what Silicon Valley does so well, right? You can get a meeting in theory with a really, respected investor as somebody just starting out. How equitable is that? We can have a whole other conversation, but I like the idea of it. And I think that
if nothing else, at least exposure like that, it's
more meritocratic than many industries.
Right.
Still, right. I think so. Yep. There's opportunity there. And that in this area of the country, it can be really traditional, and that's not necessarily intuitive. It's still very much structured by, you're meeting with people at your level. I think our region has done a really good job at saying, no, we're all going to contribute. And
love that.
There are corporations that are bought in. And I think incentivizing people there to do that is really important. I think you do that through bringing good operators in and supporting and celebrating good operators. Are usually ignored piece of the entrepreneurship ecosystem, but it's the most valuable piece to corporations. Is if I show up here, will I meet people who can solve my problems, not just people that need my help? And I think if you could start mixing that together, really powerful things happen. Programming is an easy way. I personally think that we need an alternative to pitch competitions, but I think that they're better than nothing. And so if that's what gets people into the room together, have at it. So those are a few things.
Anytime you want to brainstorm what alternatives to pitch competitions are, sign me up for that brainstorming session, because I've been saying that since 2020. Yeah, no, 100%. We need innovation there.
Yeah, that's on the list. We're gonna experiment with things, and I honestly would love to actually sit down and brainstorm on that.
All seriousness, anything I could do to help. But that's one that's a bugaboo of mine where I was like, oh, this is broken. This is no longer serving what its original good intention was. We're not doing that anymore.
If I could add one more thing to this, Rob. So
please.
At the end of the day, what I try and teach our kids is entrepreneurship is simply getting somebody to pay you to make a problem of theirs go away. That's really what it is, right? And that process of finding the problem can be really opaque and difficult depending on where you're starting from. Do you have access to a CEO of a corporate hospice provider that could just tell you, oh yeah, I'd pay you X amount right now? Whereas many people could probably solve that problem who can't get into that room.
Yep.
I think that it's so critical to get those people together, and the people who have problems they're willing to pay to solve, getting in the rooms with people who are willing to find any problem and solve it is really powerful. I think that AI creates a really interesting moment for that, because we are all trying to figure it out. And so if you can create programming around AI, you're going to attract people from the corporate world. You're going to attract people from the startup world and everything in between. And it's a really fun time where when I speak a lot about AI in my town, and the spectrum is so vast. And so it's a really interesting time for communities to leverage that and say, can we use this subject matter to pull people into the same room as a way to perhaps kickstart this petri dish, right? It's an ecology. It's an environment in the nature kind of way. You have to let people bump up against each other. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One last question before we get to our last closing question segment. If you stripped away all the funding and the tools and the tech and the ecosystem cultures, what makes someone a great entrepreneur?
They're really good at finding things that people hate to do that they do not hate doing.
Okay. I had to think about it as you said it. I was like, say it again so everybody hears it.
They're exceptional at finding things that people hate to do that they themselves do not hate to do.
There you go.
It's this love of the game of, oh, you have that problem? Well, how can I make it go away? And let's figure out a fair price to do that. It's mostly fluff outside of that. And the problems can be different levels of complexity. But if we've missed that point, then it's performative. And as Michael Girdley on Twitter would say, it's playing house. And I think that the cool thing about that is if you can boil it down to that, anybody could be an entrepreneur. It's not your ability to raise capital or build a software. So
100% true. All right, last question, closing segment, a little different vibe here. This one's kind of like Logan, the actionable advice giver, the mentor for a minute, so to speak, right? So if someone's listening today and they want to become more entrepreneurial, as we would say, giving the wide range of what that could mean, right? They don't have to become an entrepreneur. They don't have to own a bit, but they want to become more entrepreneurial. What are the 2 or 3 skills in today's world that they should really start practicing like this month or in the next couple months?
I'll give the easy and obvious one first, which is get familiar with chat-based AI tools and just get obsessed. Find a personal project that if you can't do something at work or there's some other barrier, find a personal project where you are daily using Claude or ChatGPT. I'm leaning more Claude now these days, although I've been a big GPT stan. And just get into that ecosystem and be willing to just fail your way forward there. If you spend a year heads down, you're gonna be ahead of 99% of the people in your community and will be able to use that to solve a lot of problems in new ways. The second one is kind of the opposite. We have a phrase that we coined called walk, talk, and show up. And that's how we go identify problems. It's get out there and have firsthand experience in your neighborhood. If you'll allow me to elaborate a little bit, I spent the first year in South Bend, knowing really nobody, just walking every day for an hour through different parts of the city. You walk too. You're a walking guy, right? Yeah. So I'd walk through all the different neighborhoods and figure out, make observations. And then I would talk with people ad hoc. I'd talk to some guy at the park. Hey, I don't see a lot of like Mediterranean food over here. What's up with that? Like, tell me more. Right. And then I would find problems emerge. And then I would show up in places where people cared about that problem and we're all collectively trying to solve it. And when you do that process, you will find a number of things people are trying to get off their plate that they don't want to do. And if you are bringing any sort of technical, not non-technical, I should say, any sort of AI sense to the equation, it is such a cool time to solve problems in your community with tech. And most people are so focused on building the next LLM or going to be the next quadrillionaire. Like if you just applied this in your backyard, you can make tremendous impact. So I think those are the two things.
Buddy, I can't tell you how much fun this has been. Like, I literally could talk to you all day, just selfishly, not even for the purposes of the podcast. And we will connect again and we'll catch up. But you've done 2 really fascinating things that I don't know as I necessarily expected today. One, as we've talked about and alluded to a couple of different times about the young generation, and now I'm going to throw you in this bucket. Like, you've just completely reinforced and reinvigorated my belief that our future on the other side of whatever it is we're living through right now is so exceptionally bright. And there is such a tremendous opportunity ahead of us, as a country, as cities, as regions, as states, as people, because of organizations like Rise. And kudos to Rise and congratulations to all that they've done over the 10 years to get to this point, but also shout out to the board and the people and your constituents and your supporters and your benefactors who will listen to this podcast. Because I will say, as someone who's known this young man for maybe longer than some of you have, like, Rise and Northwestern Indiana is lucky to have him, because Logan, what the energy and the perspective that you're doing, like, it's great to have a philosophy, which, by the way, this harkens back to something my dad would have said, which is the other part of a lot of the emotions that I'm feeling right now is just you're connecting me to so much nostalgia, but also practical, applicable nostalgia in the life that I grew up in as the son of a lifelong salesman and professional sales executive who then tried to teach me to be that same person. Like, walk, talk, and show up is what my dad taught me, but he just said it differently, right? I mean, so the fact that you're bringing that, and you literally are going and you're walking and you're talking and you're showing up, like, you're not just teaching somebody or young people a catchphrase, and then saying like, okay, go out and do it. I'll be here to check off the list when you get back. Like, the fact that that's how you've done what you've done in Latin American cities and countries, in your own neighborhood now as you come back to the US and you build a life with your family there in Indiana and Michigan, like, that's just, that's so central to just, it's so true, dude. It's just so fundamentally true. And so to have the chance to explore all this stuff with you today, to help our listeners who are entrepreneurial thinkers, literally, as I say in the opening, across every sector and segment of society and industry. So we've got entrepreneurial thinking politicians who are sitting on the city council of Los Angeles, right? We've got entrepreneurial thinking doctors. We've got entrepreneurial thinking entrepreneurs who are startup entrepreneurs and running big companies. We've got entrepreneurial thinking venture capital investors, private equity investors, philanthropic investors. Like, we've got all these different people that listen to and participate in our show. And for them to now have the privilege to learn about and hear firsthand, like, what life is like from an entrepreneurial economy lens in that northwestern part of the state, just kind of east of Chicago, is going to be enlightening and probably really inspiring and encouraging for them. So I'm just so grateful, buddy, and I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. I'm not at all surprised, but just really, really proud of you for what you're doing. And I'm lucky that I happen to come from where you are, and so that gives you an extra sense of like enthusiasm for what you're doing. So this is an amazing conversation, man.
Yeah, you've been an inspiration to me over the years as well. So I hope you feel some of the fruits of that. But I'm very lucky to be where I am. And I think my last parting message would be like, if you're in your 30s and you're struggling to find some purpose, you're not really sure what to do, but you have some tech background, like, there's so many orgs in your community that would thrive with the skills that you have. And that's, not even saying I'm a particularly amazing leader or anything, but there's so much purpose to be found out there.
Yes.
Rob, we got to get you up to the Midwest, man.
I have to come now. I haven't made a trip back home in quite a while.
Food haunt through Chicago,
right?
Trip out to Lake Michigan, South Bend tour. I got you.
Come down, see it all. Exactly. No, 100%. All right. So how can people find or follow you on social media if you want them to? And then how can people find the organization, website addresses, whatever?
Yeah. So the website's raisingtheregion.org. That'll tell you about our program.
And we'll put this all in the show notes. So raisingtheregion.org.
raisingtheregion.org. If you're interested in working with us on curriculum, right now we're experimenting how we engage with outside people. So this is just a great time to collaborate around, what this could look like in Silicon Valley or Mississippi. We're talking with people all over. I'm on LinkedIn. Logan Herzog, Herzog is the easiest way to find me. I am on X, but honestly not very often anymore. It's kind of a rough algo right now for me.
I bailed a long time ago, and I've replaced it with Threads, which is basically just like being on Instagram more.
Yeah, honestly, I'm about ready to. I get on it so infrequently now, but LinkedIn's the place to find me, and I talk shop all the time. So
there we go.
You'll find me there. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks, buddy. This is great.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Rob.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.